Good morning, children. Hope you are all safe at your house. This is your social class. We are going to continue with the first chapter in our history book. What, where, how, and when. In the previous class, we saw about what can we know about the past. There are several things we can know about the past, like what people ate, the kinds of clothes they wore, and then the houses in which they lived, and then about where did people live. People have lived along the banks of rivers like Narmada. Yes, and some of the earliest people who lived in the banks of river were skilled gatherers, the people who gathered their food. And then people were in the movement from one place to another place in search of jobs and for the food also. Yes, and today we are going to see about names of the land. Yes, there are two words used for our country, India and Bharat. Yes, the India, it comes from Indus called Sindhu in Sanskrit. Yes, two of the words we often use for our country are India and Bharat. The word India comes from the Indus called Sindhu in Sanskrit language. Yes, and then the Iranians and the Greeks who came through northwest about 2500 years ago and were familiar with the Indus. Before 2500 years, the Greek and Iranian people, they came through northwest. They were very familiar with the word Indus, called the Hindus or Indos, and the land to the east of the river was called India, and the land to the east of the river, it was called India. The name Bharata was used for a group of people. The name Bharata, it was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest and who are mentioned in the Rig Veda, the earliest composition in Sanskrit, dated to about 3500 years ago. Is the name Bharata, it was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest and who are mentioned in the Rig Veda. There are four Vedas: Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda and Atharvana Veda. In Rig Veda, they mentioned it as group of people. Yes, and then later it was used for a country. And finding out about the past. How can we find out the past? Is in the previous class itself I said that through manuscripts and inscription. Yes, finding out about the past. There are several ways of finding out about the past. One is to search for and read books that were written long ago. Yes, the only way is to search something about the past or to read books that were written long ago, and these are called manuscripts because they were written by hand. This comes from the Latin word manu. Manu means hand because it is a handwritten copy. These were usually written on palm leaf or on the specially prepared bark of a tree known as the bridge, which grows in the Himalayas. These manuscripts were mostly written in the palm leaf and bridge leaves. Over the years, many manuscripts were eaten away by insects. Some were destroyed, but many have survived. Yes, after a long years, the manuscripts were eaten by some insects and some manuscripts were destroyed also by natural disasters or other any disasters. But many manuscripts now we can find it. Often preserved in temples and monasteries. Monasteries means the place, the building which monks lived. Yes. Manuscripts, many manuscripts we can find now in temples and monasteries. These books dealt with all kinds of subjects, religious beliefs, practices, the lives of kings, medicine and science. These manuscripts, it gives some detailed information about the religious beliefs and practices, the lives of kings, medicines and science also. Besides, there were epics, poems, plays also. Many of these were written in Sanskrit. Others were in Prakrit. These are the languages which manuscripts were written. And in Tamil also we can find some manuscripts. We can also study inscriptions. These are writings on relatively hard surface such as stone or metal. Inscription means writings on a hard surface like stone or metal. Sometimes kings got their orders inscribed so that people could see, read and obey them. Sometimes during the ruling of kings, the king they got their orders inscribed in the stone or other hard surfaces so that people they could see and obey the rules and orders of the king. And then there are other kinds of inscription as well, where men and women including kings and queens recorded what they did. For example, kings often kept records of victories in battle. Other inscription where men and women they can keep some record about them what they are doing. And then for example, kings they often kept records of victories in battle. If they won any battle, they have the record in the hard surface like stone or metal. Yes. And then there were many other things that were made and used in the past. Those who study these objects are called archaeologists. They study the remains of buildings made of stone and bricks, paintings and sculpture. They also explore and excavate to find tools, weapons, pots, pans, ornaments and coins. Archaeologist means they dig under the surface of the earth and they find some ancient objects like weapons, pots, pans, ornaments and coins. Some of these objects may be made of stone or others of bone, baked clay or metal. They can find some hard objects. Objects that are made of hard usually survive for a long time. Yes, because the hard objects only survive for a long time. Other light objects they may decayed under the soil. Yes, so the archaeologists they dig under the surface and find some objects used by the ancient people. See, archaeologist, a person who study the remains of building and they also excavate and explore to find tools, weapons, pots, pans, etc. And then historians, the scholars who study about the past. Yes. See, these are some ancient objects found by archaeologists. Archaeologists also look for bones of animals and fish to find out what people ate in past. Archaeologists they also in the search of animals, birds and fish bone because they need to find out the people what did they ate in the past. Plant remains survive far more rarely. If seeds of grains and pieces of food have been burnt, they survive in the charred form. And sometimes they found some of the burnt grains and are pieces of food also. Yes, historians, that is scholar who study the past. Who study the past is called historians. Often use the word source to refer to the information found from manuscripts. Inscriptions and archaeology. They study from the manuscripts, inscription and archaeology. One source are found. Learning about the past becomes an adventure as we reconstruct it bit by bit. So historians and archaeologists are like detectives who use all these sources like clues to find out about our past. Yes, it is true. Historians and archaeologists, they were like a detective, because detective only they find some information about unknown thing. Yes, likewise historians and archaeologists, they were in the search of our past. One past or many? There are more than one past. Yes. Did you notice the title of this book, Our Past? We have used the word past in plural to draw attention to the fact that the past was different for different groups of people. For example, the lives of herders or farmers were different from those of kings and queens. Yes, the lives of herders and farmers were very different from kings and queens, because kings and queens, they were in the wealthiest place, but herders or farmers, they had to work hard. The lives of merchants were different from those of craftsperson and so on. Yes, every people's life were very different from each other. Also, as is true even today, people followed different practices and customs in different parts of the country. Yes, this is also true, because unity in diversity. We already saw this in the civics chapter, because all people in the country, they follow different religious practice and they have different culture also. For example, today most people living in the Andaman Islands get their own food by fishing, hunting and collecting forest produce. By contrast, most people living in cities depend on others for supplies of food. Yes. Today, most people living in the Andaman Island, they get their own food by hunting and collecting forest produce. But in the people who lived in the cities, they only depend on others for their food. Yes, differences such as these existed in the past as well. The same differences were exist in the past also, because kings and queens, their life were very different from farmers and herders. Yes. Besides, there is another kind of difference. We know a great deal about kings and the battles they fought, because they kept records of their victories. Generally, ordinary people, they did not keep records of what they did. Yes, the kings, they have their records of battles and victories, but ordinary people like hunters, gatherers, farmers, fishing folk, they do not have any records of their life. While archaeology helps us to find out about their lives, there is much that remains unknown. Yes, till now there is more history remains unknown to us. Yes, and then what do dates mean? If somebody asks you the date, you will probably mention the day, month and year, 2000 and something. Yes, if you ask what is today's date, you will say August 15, 2020. But these years are counted from the date generally assigned to the birth of Jesus Christ, the founder of the Christianity. So 2000 means 2000 years after the birth of Christ. Yes, all dates before the birth of Christ are counted backward and usually have the letters BC. Before the birth of Christ, they will say BC, before Christ. In this book, we will refer to dates going back from the present. We will go back from the present using 2000 as our starting point. Yes, that's all children. Your lesson is over. In this chapter, we saw about the ancient people, where did they live and how does the word India comes. And then there were two words often used for our country, India and Bharat, and finding out about the past by manuscripts and inscription, and then about archaeologists and historians. And then what do dates mean? Yes, that's all children. Note down your homework. Read the lesson fully and frame 20 fill in the blanks with answer. Yes, the answer should be important word. Yes, thank you children. We will meet in next class.